Hello, my fellow chefs. Today we talk Cioppino, sourcing quality ingredients and elevating simple dishes. I am Mark Grigsby, your chef and guide through this experience, and this is the IncrEDIBLE Discourse. Hello and welcome. I am Mark Grigsby, and you have found me here yet again at the IncrEDIBLE Discourse. Today we're going to talk about and make the San Francisco treat. And no, it's not rice-a-roni, the other San Francisco treat, the Cioppino. I know I say this shit every episode, but this one is one of my favorite dishes. I like to eat. Sue me. There are many different ways to make this dish, and a lot of cultures or cuisines have their own variations or recipes of this dish. But this one originates from San Francisco in the late 19th century. The roots of this dish are tied to Italian immigrants, particularly from the Ligurian region of Italy, their little panhandle of sorts in the north part of the country from the Ligurian seacoast. These immigrants settled in the North Beach area of San Fran and were fishermen by trade. These fishermen, who also worked in the bay, brought culinary tradition, including simple flavors of seafood dishes. Cioppino is thought to be inspired by Ligurian seafood stews like chupin, a simple soup made from fish, garlic, and tomatoes. The name Cioppino likely derives from this word, though the San Fran dish evolved into something distinct and richer. This dish was born mostly out of necessity and resourcefulness. Fishermen would take the catch of the day, which was whatever they had left over or whatever they couldn't sell, and throw it into this communal pot. This catch could include various types of seafood such as Dungeness crab, shrimp, clams, mussels, squid, and different types of fish. As the stew developed in San Francisco, it retained its Italian flavors but adapted to local ingredients. It was traditionally cooked with tomatoes, garlic, onions, white wine, olive oil, and served with crusty bread. By the early 20th century, Cioppino became a popular dish in the city's restaurants, especially in the Italian-American neighborhood of North Beach. Fisherman's Wharf, where seafood was abundant, became a hub for serving this dish, and restaurants would proudly feature it as a house specialty. Tadich Grill is a restaurant that serves this dish and has been around since 1854, right across the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. If you're ever in town, go nuts! Now, this dish is a classic seafood dish with mussels, clams, whitefish, squid, shrimp, and scallops. It's made in a rich tomato fumet with tons of aromatics. Traditionally, it is made with Dungeness crab legs and whitefish such as halibut. But since we're on the East Coast today, I'm going to use blue crab, and not just the legs, but the whole damn crab cut in half. And I'm going to use yellowtail snapper for my fish rather than the halibut. I'm also going to use a shrimp slightly larger than I usually use, the 10 to 12s, and I want it with the head and the shell on. This is important for two reasons. One, I want the head and the shell to infuse in my fish fumet I'm going to make. And two, because larger shrimp make the presentation a lot nicer. It gives a really nice wow factor. And speaking of wow factor, you know I want the big scallops, the U8s. The same ones that we used a couple of weeks ago with the Spanish fusion dish. Now, for my tomato fumet, I'm going to use fennel bulb, and that's not a traditional ingredient of this dish. But I like the way the fennel enhances and marries well with the fumet and the seafood in this dish. I'm going all out for this dish and making an infused oil and some crostinis that have been coated in an anchovy butter that I'm going to explain how to make. These last 2 weeks, we have used minimal equipment and simple ingredients to make amazing dishes that have been rather easy to make. This week, we're going to get back in the lab and we're going to be putting in some work. There are a lot of ingredients and parts to this dish that takes a considerable amount of time to produce, but I love this dish because there are so many things that I love. Scallops, shrimp, snapper. I also like that this dish uses just about every bit of every component. For example, the fish carcasses, the fennel fronds, the shrimp shells and heads. I feel like this is one of those dishes that because you're putting in so much time and effort, we should go the extra mile and make sure we have some great garnishes and bread to go with it. And if you're in a restaurant, we're talking about $35 to $40 per stew. You better make sure you go maximum effort on your impression. Later in the show, we're going to be talking about sourcing quality ingredients and elevating simple dishes. And this dish is a prime example of how you can take a simple stew that can be made using various ingredients and techniques and refine it by sourcing high-end quality ingredients and elevating it with a refined technique and some banging-ass garnishes that make it look even more extravagant. Anyhow, before we even get that far, I got a rumbly in the tumbly, so it's time to eat. So before we jump into the equipment and ingredients part of this, I wanted to note that most of the recipes we've done before are for one portion or person. But today, we're going to make this for at least 2 people or 2 portions. This recipe takes time and is an amazing dish, so it shouldn't be eaten alone. Call some friends or your spouse and blow their asses away. Anyway, you're going to need a few pieces of equipment to pull this one off. First, you're going to need a 6-quart stock pot or larger if you have one. We'll be making the fumet in this pot, so you'll need something deep to cover the fish carcasses. We'll also need an immersion blender or a stick blender, and yes, you can use a regular blender as well, but it's way easier if you use a stick blender. We're going to need a 6-quart sauté pan with a fitting lid, a smaller 1-quart sauce pot, and a 10-inch non-stick skillet. These 3 will be making different components for our final dish. We're going to need an 8-ounce ladle and a chinois, or a fine mesh strainer. You'll need a holding plate, a mixing bowl, and a few other small wares, like a set of tongs, measuring spoons and cups, and a slotted spoon. Now, I know this is a lot of equipment, and a lot of it you probably already have on hand. I'll set you up with some links to everyone's favorite market, Amazon, just in case you need to pick up some of it. I should probably become an affiliate for them. I'm bringing them a lot of business. Maybe they'll give me my own page. Who knows? Now, let's talk about the ingredients that you're going to need to make this. Today's grocery list will be big, and I'm sorry but not sorry at the same time. This dish has a lot of components, and many of the ingredients you'll be using almost every part of it, so there's very little waste. I'm going to break this whole thing down into 5 parts so we're mentally organized with what goes where. First, the fish and shrimp fumet. A fumet is a concentrated stock, especially of game or fish, that's used for flavoring. To make it, we're going to need 1 snapper carcass rinsed well. Now, I recommend you butcher your own fish. Now, if that's a task that you're not up for, that's completely understandable. You'll need to ask your fishmonger to give you the carcasses. If they don't have yellowtail snapper available, any snapper or local fish will do. You need 8 U10 shrimp with the shells and the heads rinsed very well. Get the shrimp whole with the shell and the heads on. You're going to use the meat in the actual stew and the shells and the heads to make the fumet. Trust me. You're also going to need half of a fennel bulb cut in half, half of a yellow onion also cut in half, 3 celery stalks rough chopped, 1 carrot rough chopped, and you don't need to peel it, just rinse it really well, 8 garlic cloves smashed, 1 tablespoon of black peppercorn, 3 bay leaves, 5 thyme sprigs, 1 quart of white wine, and a dry Sauvignon Blanc works really, really well here. And then you're going to need 4 quarts of water. All right, for the tomato broth, we're going to need 4 tablespoons of olive oil, the other half of that fennel bulb small diced, 2 shallots small diced, 7 cloves of garlic minced, 2 cups of San Marzano canned tomatoes, and we're going to hand crush those before we put them in the pot. We're going to need 6 cups of the fish fumet that we're getting ready to make, 2 bay leaves, 1 cup of white wine, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 teaspoons of fresh thyme leaves, no stems, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, 3 large basil leaves, no stalks or stems, a half a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. For the actual stew, you need quite a few things as well. Try to get fresh where you can, and keep in mind that if you cannot find some of these things or you don't like them, simply omit them and keep it moving. You'll need 1 or 2 snapper fillets, depending on the size, skinned and cut into chunks, 4 U10 scallops cleaned, 8 of those shrimps we peeled earlier for the fumet, make sure they're deveined, 6 middle neck clams, 6 large Mediterranean mussels scrubbed and debearded, 4 calamari tubes sliced into rings, 6 calamari tentacles, and 1 blue crab cut in half. For the garnishes we're going to need, and remember, this is also optional, you don't have to do it, 3 tablespoons of finely chopped parsley, 6 fennel fronds, and these are the frilly-looking things in the green of the fennel tops, I guess. They look like dill, but they're actually fucking fennel, and 4 lemon slices, and take out the seeds. Now for the infused oil, we're going to make a batch of this, and you may not use it all, but you can save it and use it for all kinds of recipes. It gives a nice richness and pop of flavor. Hell, you could even cook with this if you so choose to do so. And if you don't want to use this oil, it's completely optional. It's definitely not a deal breaker. You're going to need 2 cups of high-end olive oil, 1/8 of a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes, 4 garlic cloves, and don't smash them, you need them whole, half of a lemon peel, 1/8 of a teaspoon of fennel seed, and 1 rosemary sprig, and 6 black peppercorns. Next and lastly, this is what you'll need for the French bread crostinis with anchovy butter. Again, this is an element to elevate the dish. You don't need to make this if you don't want to, but this broth is so good, I recommend you have some kind of crusty bread or crostini to sop it up. Or you could drink this shit straight from the bowl. I won't lie, been there. So, you'll need a 4-ounce stick of whole butter softened, 4 each anchovy fillets finely chopped, 2 tablespoons of parsley chopped, 4 garlic confit. Now, this comes from the infused oil that we're going to make, and you're going to mash and chop it into a paste. You need half of a lemon's zest with a microplane and a half of a teaspoon of fresh ground pepper. I know this is a huge grocery list, but you don't have to make this exactly like I am. But if you do, the ingredients list and recipe is always on the IncrEDIBLEDiscourse.com. Don't try and write all this shit down as I say it. Just go to the fucking website. The beauty of this recipe is that it can be molded into whatever you like. If you don't want to make the oil or the crostinis for whatever reason, then don't. And in the stew, you don't need every single seafood element if you can't find them or you don't like them. You could do this recipe with just mussels and clams, or just scallops and fish, or just fish and calamari. It's really versatile, and it could be made with a lot less ingredients. Now, if you're in a restaurant, especially a higher-end one, many of these things you already have on hand, or you can get them through your purveyors. Having all of these components and creating a more elevated dish means you can charge more for it. Believe it or not, in my experience, my little experience, they'll pay for fresh seafood, especially if your restaurant location is close to the ocean. And in Miami, everywhere I have sold this dish, it's been a fucking hit. Now, let's get cooking. First, I got to make the fumet, and look, this recipe takes a bit of time, and I know that. If you try to be a hero and make this whole thing in a day, you're going to be cranky and tired, and if you're in a restaurant, unless you start early as shit in the morning, chances are you're not going to make it in time for service. So, my recommendation is that you make the fumet first, and you make it the day before. You can even make the fumet 3 or 4 days in advance if you have to, and chances are, if you make it the day before, it'll be even better in flavor because it'll bloom overnight. So, first I'm going to get my 6-quart stock pot on the stove or my range or whatever, and I'm going to heat it to medium-low heat. I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of oil at the bottom, and I'm going to evenly coat the pot. I'm going to add the fennel, the onion, the carrot, the garlic, the peppercorn, and the bay leaves, and I'm going to sweat these for about 5 minutes, stirring them occasionally so they don't develop any color. Remember, sweating is cooking something at a low temperature to soften them and bring out their flavors. After the 5 minutes, I'm going to add the shrimp shells and heads and sweat for 3 or 4 more minutes. During this time, the shrimp shells will start to change color, kind of an opaque or reddish hue, and the vegetables will be softer but not mushy. This is what we're looking for at this point. Now I'm going to add the white wine. It should begin to simmer and burn out the alcohol. This takes about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we add the snapper carcass and mix it all up. I'm going to add the fresh thyme and the water to cover the carcass by a pretty good amount, and then I'm going to raise the heat slightly to medium and bring to a simmer, but not a rolling boil. A simmer will extract the collagen from the bones without clouding the liquid. A rolling boil will leave the liquid murky and cloudy. I'm going to let this simmer for about 90 minutes, replacing the water that reduces out. It's important to note that I'm not going to replace the water more than 1 time, and I'm only going to do this if the water level gets really low. I want less water than I started, as this concentrates the broth and makes it thicker. Once the time is done, we should see the bones and carcasses falling apart and deteriorating into really small pieces. This indicates that the extraction process is complete. I'm going to strain the stock through a fine mesh sieve, I'm going to save the liquid, and I'm going to discard the solids, and then I'm going to chill it completely through. This recipe is going to make more stock than you need, and I purposely wrote it this way for 2 reasons. The first is you need this on hand just in case you over-reduce the tomato fumet when you're steaming the seafood. The second reason is because you should always have this on hand. Remember in the stocks episode a couple of episodes back, I noted that the stocks can be frozen to use for later. Whenever I make a stock, I try to make a lot more at one time so I don't have such a lengthy process every time I need a stock. That's pro tips from yours truly. Anyway, While this stock is going, I'm going to knock down 2 other components of this dish so they're already ready when I cook the actual stew. I'm going to prepare the infused oil and the anchovy butter at this time. The oil is easy. I'm going to take the 1-quart sauce pot and combine all of the ingredients inside. So, that's the oil, the crushed red pepper, the garlic cloves, the lemon peel, the fennel seed, the rosemary sprig, and the peppercorns. I'm going to bring this to a very bare simmer, and I'm going to let it go for about 15 to 17 minutes. You don't want this to roll because it's going to fry the shit inside, and then it's going to be extremely bitter. I'm going to barely simmer this just enough to extract all of those flavors into the oil. At the end of the 15 to 17 minutes, everything should be wilted and toasted. I'm going to remove this from the heat and bring it to room temperature, about another 15 minutes or so. We don't have to rush this process. Now, let's get everything going for our anchovy butter. This one is even easier. You're going to add the softened butter, the anchovy fillets, the parsley, the lemon zest, and the black pepper to a mixing bowl. 2 things to note here. The butter must be softened to execute this recipe properly. Do not try to soften the butter with a microwave. Do it naturally so it doesn't break. You need this butter to stay in one piece and not be liquidy. You need it softened, so leave it out for a couple of hours. I pulled mine out before I started making my fumet to give it ample enough time to get it where I need it to be. The second thing to note here is that I didn't add the garlic confit yet. To do this, I'm going to need to fish it out of the infused oil I just made with the slotted spoon and rest it on paper towels until it completely cools. Adding this in warm or hot would melt the butter, and I don't want to do that. After it comes to room temperature, it should be very soft and should be able to be smashed into a paste. I'm going to run my knife through it a few times to make sure that it is. And then I'm going to fold the garlic into the softened butter mixture. I can also cut the bread at this point. I like to cut them on a bias in like an oval-looking shape and store them into a zip bag until I'm ready to cook it. So, let's recap what we're doing here in order because it's a lot and it could be confusing, so pay attention. Pull out the butter for the anchovy butter first. Then make the fumet. Then make the infused oil. Then make the anchovy butter and cut the bread. That's where we're at right now. Once all of those things are done, we're almost ready to start the stew. But before we do, we have to make the tomato fumet, which is the base of the entire dish. It's the star, so to speak. Going into our 6-quart pot, I'm going to heat it to medium-low and add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil and coat the pot. Then I'm going to add the fennel and the shallot, and I'm going to sweat it until it's soft and translucent. This will take about 3 to 5 minutes, give or take. Remember, you're sweating this, so stir occasionally and no color. Then I stir in the garlic and cook until fragrant, about 2 minutes. Now I add the tomato paste and I coat the vegetables well and cook out the can, another 2 to 3 minutes. We've done this before in a previous episode, so if you didn't listen to that one, you know what to do. Now I'm going to add the white wine and deglaze. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to scrape the bottom of the pan and get all those little bits of fond from it. We're going to cook this for about another couple of minutes, and then we'll notice here that the liquid in the bottom is starting to thicken up, and this is good. We're building the flavor here. Now I add the crushed San Marzano tomatoes, the bay leaf, the thyme, the oregano, the basil, the crushed red pepper, and that beautiful fish fumet we just made, and I'm going to bring that whole mixture to a simmer, and I'm going to let it go for 25 to 30 minutes. If you need to raise the heat to bring this to a simmer and then lower it, do it. You need a good 20 to 25 minutes of actual simmer time to really meld these flavors together. After this, we're going to remove it from the heat, we're going to connect our immersion blender, and we're going to blend this tomato mixture until it's smooth. Now, to make this a little bit more refined, we're going to strain this through the fine mesh sieve without pushing it through. You want all of the chunks of shit to stay in the strainer and the beautiful, flavorful liquid to strain out. Discard any of this pulp and taste the soup for salt. I'm going to transfer this tomato fumet to a 6-quart sauté pan with the lid. You should have almost 2 quarts of the fumet, which is good because you need enough to steam all of the seafood, and then you need to have enough to have the soup in the bottom of the bowls when you plate. If you don't, this is exactly where the extra fish stock comes into play. All right, now that we've gotten through all of that, we're ready to actually make the stew. I told you we were going to work today. You got off easy making fucking sandwiches and shit these last 2 weeks. Now it's time to tighten up our aprons and make some good shit this week. Sometimes good shit is a labor of love, and sometimes it's a fucking sandwich. This is why we're making 2 portions this week. After all of that, do you really want to eat this shit alone? Fuck no, you don't. You want someone to taste this shit and pat your ass on the back for your efforts. I know I would. So get your flowers, and this dish is worth it. Now, let's make the long-awaited stew I've been building you up for. All right, so we're going to start by bringing the tomato fumate up to medium heat. It's going to start to simmer in about 2 minutes or so because it should still be hot. I'm going to add the clams, the mussels, and the crab, and I'm going to cover it. We're going to steam these for about 3 to 5 minutes. The crab will start to turn red, and the mussels and the clams will start to open up. This indicates that we're on track. If the mussels and the clams do not open, keep the lid on for another 2 to 3 minutes. Once they've opened, we're going to take our tongs and we're going to remove the mussels and the clams and reserve them on the plate. We don't want to overcook them. We want them to be nice, plump, and juicy. Now I'm going to add the calamari, the shrimp, the scallops, and the snapper pieces, and the lemon slices, and then I'm going to cover it again. This is going to steam somewhat quickly, probably about another 3 or 4 minutes. The shrimp should start to turn pink and the fish opaque, tender, and almost falling apart. If this is not happening, keep the lid on and go another 2 minutes or so. Once this has happened, I'm going to remove it from the heat, and I'm going to remove the lid, and I'm going to let it sit for a couple of minutes while I start our bread. I'm going to spread my softened anchovy butter across 4 of the crostinis, and I'm going to put my nonstick skillet on medium-low heat. I'm going to wait for it to get hot, and then I'm going to add the crostinis butter side down. The butter will start to melt, and the crostinis will start toasting. Let's plate this dish while we're waiting on the crostini. In the bowl, I'm going to divide the clams and mussels that opened evenly between the two, and I'm going to organize them so they look nice with the open side up. I'll use the slotted spoon to do the same with the other seafood, and then use the ladle to pour the soup into the bowl and make sure that I get some of it into every one of those shellfish shells. Oh, damn, I can't even say that. Can we say that 10 times fast? Shellfish shell, shellfish shell, shellfish shells. Anyways, by this time, your crostini should have some nice color on the butter side. I'm going to flip these bad boys over, and I'm going to let the bottoms get a little bit of color, about a minute or so. We're going to drizzle the infused oil over the top of the dish, and don't be excessive. It's supposed to be just an accent, remember? Now I sprinkle the chopped parsley over, and I add my 2 fennel fronds on the top and get that contrast of color. To finish, I add 2 of those beautiful anchovy buttered crostinis in each of the bowls to the side, kind of sticking into the broth, and boom! All of our hard work just paid right the fuck off. You have a delicious, amazing dish that if you love seafood, you're going to fucking die for this. And that's a figure of speech. Don't fucking die, okay? There's plenty of shit left to cook. And let me know what you thought about this recipe and if you guys have any variations of it. Send me your thoughts, your questions, and pictures of your work at theincrediblediscourse.com, where you can find all things that we're up to. The website has all of these recipes on there, as well as copies of all of our episodes to date. If you need a mentor or some help, hit us up on the website and we'll make sure we get you to where you want to go. Anyhow, now that our bellies are full, it's time for Food for Thought, or what I like to call Pro Tips from a Chef's Lips. Today's advice column starts with a simple topic: source quality ingredients. I know this sounds obvious because quality ingredients almost automatically lead to better tasting dishes, which directly affects consumer satisfaction simply because the ingredients themselves shine. But there are a few other things that happen when you use better quality ingredients. Consistency is key, right? You want to make the best possible dish and have the ability to recreate this dish if it's successful over and over and over again, yes? Having reliable suppliers that offer quality ingredients ensures your dishes are consistent in flavor, texture, and presentation every time. So when you're buying, make sure that you're getting your ingredients from somewhere that has an established name, has a reputation for selling high ingredients, and it would also be good if they had a great ethics and sustainability practice as well. You know, reduce your fucking carbon footprint. It's all our social responsibilities to create a cleaner world to eat in. Live in, you know, wink, wink. Another obvious reason to source quality ingredients is so that you don't get sick. Foodborne illness, spoilage, and contamination is a real thing and could fuck you up, or even worse, kill you or the person that you're feeding. Purchasing safe, wholesome, and clean products builds customer confidence, and it also helps avoid getting sued or having health code violations. In the industry, we all hate the fucking health inspector, but they're there for a reason, to make sure that we're keeping up our end of the bargain when it comes to serving people edible food that won't kill them. I'll do an episode eventually on best practices to help keep great standards and blow your inspections out of the water. On the flip side of spoiled food is the food that provides high nutritional value. Fresh and minimally processed ingredients have higher nutritional value. Most people nowadays are health conscious, even if it's just a little bit. The world has evolved from preservatives and overprocessed foods, and people are looking for something that will give them something in return. And that's fair. Fresh food does that trick. Now, in the restaurant, especially in a competitive market, high-quality ingredients can be a unique selling point. Highlighting your commitment to superior ingredients helps differentiate your menu from the guy down the street trying to make a buck, and oftentimes justifies premium pricing. A great example of this is the beef market. There are so many levels to beef. The quality is inspected a few different ways, and the price is usually reflected through that. Let's take skirt steak, for instance. You could sell a lower quality skirt steak and maybe get away with selling it on your menu for $25. But this steak is probably flavorless, tough, and tastes like a rubber shoe sole. But if you sourced a quality skirt steak, a higher-end inspected piece like a prime or a certified Angus, you'd be getting a top-of-the-line steak that you could probably mark up to $38 or $40 for the same dish just because you're now serving a juicy, flavorful, memorable piece. Patrons will spend the extra money on a quality dish because they know what they're getting out of it. I have religiously spent the extra on beef in all my restaurants my entire career, and in turn, beef has been one of my specialties on most of my menus. People love it because they get a consistent, juicy, and flavorful piece that they will remember and crave. And here's a pro tip. Another pro tip for you. A high-end steak doesn't need fancy marinades or sauces to go with it. It really needs just salt and pepper and someone who knows what the fuck they're doing when they're cooking it. Which leads me to my next point. Brand image. Your restaurant's reputation is tied directly to the quality of ingredients you serve. By emphasizing the sourcing of premium, sustainable, and local produced ingredients, you can enhance your brand image as a place that prioritizes quality. You want people to know every time they eat at your spot, they're going to get something good, and you want them to recommend and tell other people and friends the same shit. I know that in today's world, with the internet and all, word of mouth has been downsized somewhat, but it's still relative. People still talk about restaurants whether they're good or bad, and in today's world, it could be worse. They could write it. And once you get that rep, that shit's hard to shake, man. It'll end up costing you time and money that may wind up closing your doors. Don't risk it to save a buck. Be smart. Sell good shit. You want your customers' trust and loyalty. That's how you keep the doors open. Just like in today's dish, I use fresh mussels, clams, and seafood to make this incredible dish. I go to a guy who I've known for years who has supplied my family and restaurants for over a decade now. He never fails, and that has created a relationship of trust between he and I. A trust that allows me to comfortably say I serve the best quality seafood in town, and my clients and customers know it. When I call him, I get an honest answer about what's good and what's not, when things were brought in, their age, and so on. And it's important to create this relationship for the betterment of your establishment. The seafood is a culinary wildfire, and when people know you have the best, they show in hordes, and they tell everybody. Do yourself the favor and find amazing vendors who are honest with you instead of trying to sell you something. In the end, everybody wins. My last topic stems from what we practiced earlier when we made the Cioppino. Elevate simple dishes. Sure, there are a lot of fancy dishes that you can put on your menus that will blow people away and they'll surely pay for. But consider this. What if you could make something simple and elevate it? People tend to buy based on nostalgia and where certain dishes or ingredients take them. Simple dishes that remind them of home takes them to a place of happiness or provides a great memory of times past. Take simple dishes and blow their minds with high-quality ingredients and garnishes, or even variations of the dish, and you'll make money. Elevation starts with our first topic, sourcing quality ingredients. Fresh, high-quality ingredients have more vibrant and natural flavors that make the simplest dishes taste extraordinary. Poor quality ingredients can dull the taste of a dish even if you prepared it well. You gotta use good shit. I can't emphasize this enough. People can taste the difference and will know. Interesting garnishes can elevate flavor. Simple shit like a drizzle of infused olive oil made with high-end olive oil, or a sprinkle of cheese or microgreens that pair well with the flavors that you're trying to create. All of this can make dishes seem more refined than they really are. And always make from scratch, chefs. And I'll say this again. Always make from scratch. Stay away from previously frozen or canned or processed foods. Use scratch-made seasonings and fresh herbs where you can. Sure, it takes a little bit of time to make it, and yes, it does require some knowledge, but in the end will pay off miles. And making from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, it's a sure winner every single time. Knowledge is power. I love knowing that all this shit that comes in a can or frozen, I know how to make from scratch, and it's 100% better every single time. I cannot think of a dish or a sauce that comes frozen that's better than what I can make from scratch. And keep in mind the elements that excite the palate: acid, sweet, texture. All of these things keep the dish interesting. A splash of acid or sweet brightens the dishes and cuts through rich, fatty, and heavy foods. Texture is equally as important. No one likes all one texture over and over again in a dish. It's boring as fuck. You want to highlight different elements, some soft and crunchy, some creamy and chunky. You get me? Adding nuts, seeds, crispy onions, or croutons to soft dishes like soups and salads, it keeps shit interesting. And be technique-driven and accurate when you're doing it. Make sure you hit all of your temperatures on meat and fish. Don't overcook and have good color. All of these things matter in restaurants. You hear the term, the little things matter. These are the fucking little things, and they fucking matter. It's the difference between, it's all right, and, man, this is extraordinary. Cooking is an accumulation of many things happening at the same time. High-quality ingredients prepared well through technique, attention, and time paired with high-end components that provide palate exhilaration with heat, acid, and sweet balance with compelling texture creates an amazing dish. And that's just the cooking part. And if you don't take anything away from this, remember that part. Cooking is an accumulation of many things happening at the same time. Elevate your plateware, the stemware, the beverage service, the plating. Plate your food with intention. Use contrasting colors and clean lines to make the dish look appetizing, captivating, and elegant. They say you eat with your eyes first, so why wouldn't you satisfy your visual hunger? Complement the food with amazing drinks and wines. The colors, the aromas, and the natural beauty of the fresh ingredients contribute to a more satisfying dining experience both visually and in taste. So if you haven't figured it out yet, building an amazing dish takes work and a lot of it, but it starts with the best ingredients possible. You can have the fanciest tablewares, all the bells and whistles, but if you're serving shit from a can, none of that matters. Respect the craft. Respect what we do. When they say cook with love, that's what we're talking about. Focus, chefs. Learn every day. Keep building. Keep refining. Use good shit. Make good shit. Try the Cioppino and let me know how you did. Sorry today's show was a little longer, but it was fun. We got to explore some really cool ingredients and made something that can be simple at home or elevated in your restaurants. I told you we would work today, and hopefully your efforts paid off. Elevation, guys. Elevation will be your evolution. Trust me. And if you like what you heard today, chefs, and you want to support the show, there's a link in the description, and be sure to leave me 5 stars on Spotify or a great review wherever you're listening to this. And visit theincrediblediscourse.com as well as all of our social platforms. I appreciate your time as always. I'm Mark Grigsby, and you've just been put through The Incredible Discourse. Till next time, hit that theme music.